Today I would like to give you some advices for good results when playing live through a front of house system with your modeling unit. When playing live, I think it's very important for us guitar players to have the perfect tone to attract as many girls as possible. And I think there are a couple of rules which I personally always follow when playing live since I started playing live, which was maybe 20 years ago or some shit, even longer. And the most important thing in my opinion is keep your setup simple. So don't mess around with it when playing, and don't mess around with it too much when practicing. Start with one amp and one IR and tweak it so that it's perfect in your ears, maybe in your studio environment or in your rehearsal environment. It should be very balanced. Not too much bass frequencies, not too much high frequencies, but I did a distinct video about EQing live guitars. So I will not talk about that EQing thing too much in this video. But other than that, sticking to one amp and IR is very important, because imagine if you are a front of house engineer or a listener and then the guitar tone changes drastically from song to song or even within a song because the guitar player is switching amps or even worse, caps, IRs. It will be a total mess. And the front of house engineer, he has to concentrate on the vocals usually, because they have to be heard, and he doesn't have to, he's not able to concentrate on the guitar tone always, or on the bass tone, or on the drum tones. And so it's very important that you have the consistency, that you are playing with the same sound for most of the time. And that goes for all distorted tones. Pristine clean tones, like maybe the Nothing Else Matters cleans, it's a different thing. I will talk about that in a second. But everything from there, which starts with a little bit distortion to medium crunch to gain to high gain, usually you can use the same amp and cap. At least I do this, and it was always working. What I personally do is I'm playing high gain most of the time. So I dial in my perfect high gain tone with the amp and the cap. And from there, if there are certain songs where I need a little bit less gain or crunch tone, then I dial back the gain or dial back maybe the volume in the overdrive section, in the overdrive pedal which I'm using. I even don't switch it off, the OD, because that will also change the sound a lot. But if you just dial back the volume a little bit, this will reduce the gain. And then suddenly you have a crunch tone out of your high gain amp. So that is very helpful. And your tone will always have the same frequency structure, because you don't change the amp or the IR. By the way, changing the IR is even worse than changing the amp, because the IR is making up much more of the tone. And that would be equivalent if you would replace your speaker in an analog setup. So from a Marshall cap maybe to a Fender cap or something. That will totally change your sound. So I would not recommend to change the amp and the cap in a live situation. And also what is not very helpful is if you use tons of effects. I personally don't use reverb when playing live, except for maybe some clean guitars, leads, something, but not for distorted tones. I use delay, but you have to know how to dial it in. So I also did some videos about that, I think, but usually I don't go more than 30% with the mix, with the delay, except for these rhythmic delays like the U2 sound, where you want the delay to be in the same volume like your usual guitar signal. But other than that, if you want the typical lead delay, not much more than 30%, I would say. Also the other things, Modulation effects, they will also change your sound drastically, and unless you don't know what you want, which is the desired sound you want to have, I'd rather leave it off, especially the chorus, just the chorus settings. So I'm using the chorus on distorted tones only if it's necessary, because it's there. So for example, in the Nirvana tones or something, there maybe you have to use the chorus for that Nirvana tone. But other than that, I don't use it just for fun. I use it on cleans, but not on distorted tones. So if you don't know that much about tweaking effects, I would recommend to switch these off, and just a couple of or a tiny bit of delay when playing leads, that will help. And also very important is to keep all your sounds at the same volume. You can adjust that easily if you have a level meter, and then maybe you can do some chugging, but if you're using the same sounds and if you have a modeling unit, it will not be a problem to use the same setting, exactly the same settings, at least volume wise, in each preset. And that will also help a lot. When switching from rhythm to lead, what I personally do is I'm using the same sound, but I'm boosting it about 3 dB, I think, 2 or 3 dB, not more than that. That is usually enough. Usually, if you were the only guitar player in the group, like me, then you don't have to cut through a wall of guitars when playing a solo. So you don't have to EQ it differently, because suddenly your rhythm guitar is not there, and then you're playing leads, and you will be a little bit more prominent, but then boost it maybe by 2 or 3 dB. But don't change the sound. If you wanna cut through a little bit more, then also you can boost certain frequencies, like maybe the 4K or something. But I would be careful with that. So keep the levels very even. That will help a lot. And for cleans, this is even more important. I mean the pristine cleans without any kind of distortion, because these are way more dynamic than distorted tones. Distorted tones, they are usually compressing. So if you're picking harder or a little bit softer, it doesn't make any difference volume-wise. But if you're playing cleans, it makes a huge difference if you're picking a little bit harder. So what I recommend is use compression on your cleans, so that it's always in the same volume. And also use a low cut on the cleans, because these lows, they're causing problems if, especially if you don't use a compressor. And if you pick a little bit too hard, you have way too much lows, and then as a result, maybe the front of house engineer will turn your signal down, and then you will not be heard. So on cleans, it's very important to have the low cut, maybe a little bit higher even than on the distorted tones. And yeah, compression is always a good idea on clean tones. And also make sure to adjust it volume-wise to the distorted tones. So I personally always think of the categories totally clean, and then the rest, which is some kind of distorted. And for the rest, which has some kind of distortion, if it's light, crunch, medium gain, whatever, I'm always using the same amp cap combination. And that will help a lot. Other than that, as I said, I did a distinct video about EQing live tones, but it's not the case that you have to EQ it totally different depending on the front of house systems you're playing or on the environment you're playing from the scratch. Once, if you have your guitar tone and that works and that is evenly balanced, it will work on any kind of front of house system. Of course, you have to maybe fine tune it or adjust some things, because maybe some front of house systems, they have a little bit more highs or lows or mids, whatever. You can do this with a global EQ or something, but usually that is the job of the front of house engineer. And another mistake which I saw people doing quite often is if you are just using one floor monitor maybe at a rehearsal space, you crank it and it starts to get harsh and it starts to compress by itself. Then they taking out maybe all the highs and boosting the mids, and then it's pretty loud, you can hear it, but you're shaping the frequency curve very drastically. And that will not work on a proper front of house system, because the proper front of house system is way more linear than your floor monitor at crank volumes. And usually if something sounds good at a proper studio environment at moderate volumes, if you're cutting off the highs and the lows, I would say around maybe 100 Hertz and maybe 5K, that it will work through a proper front of house system. It may not work through one cranked floor monitor that well. That's due to the fact that these things, they are not linear, they are not FR when you crank them. But a proper PA system, it's way more linear, because all the frequencies there should be addressed equally. And for that reason, then your guitar tone will work. So don't do these incredible EQ shaping just to make it sound fat and good on your own floor monitor. Instead, make it sound very well balanced on maybe a front of house system or a proper studio system. And then it will work at any volume and also at any environment. And that said, it will work, but don't expect your guitar tone to sound exactly the same through every system and in every environment, because that is impossible. It's even the material of the walls and the floor you're playing, it makes a difference sound-wise. So I would rather focus on your playing. And that would be the last advice I would give you. Focus on your playing, that you're playing accurate, that you can hear yourself really perfect. The best solution, in my opinion, is using in-ear monitors, and then you can adjust your monitor sound by yourself and play accurate. And if you have a proper guitar tone and you play accurate, then it will work in any live situation. Then the front of house engineer doesn't have to do a lot. He will maybe EQ it a little bit initially and set the volume. But other than that, he doesn't have to do anything except maybe, keeping volume a little bit up or playing a solo or something. Because especially if you're playing with other musicians, they are also changing the volume from time to time, especially the drummer, and hitting it a little bit harder. That is usual, but it's not that you have to start EQing every preset when coming through a new venue or a new front of house system. So that was a lot of talking, but at least these things, they help me a lot for my live tone. And I got a lot of compliments for live tones, but honestly, I think there are other instruments which are way more difficult to tweak in the live situation than guitars, especially the drums, but also bass and these things. So guitars, once you have the understanding and you have your volume set up properly and you don't use millions of different sounds, then you'll be fine. I hope this helps you. Please post your comments about playing live in the comment section. And other than that, I hope to see you. Bye.